Could not be with us this morning as she's been held up at the airport, so I am going to act as the moderator instead. Now this task was thrust onto me only a few minutes ago, so I'm afraid I haven't prepared for it. I prepared to speak. So my name is James Rogers, and I'm the co-founder and director of research at the Council on Geostrategy, and we're honoured to be the co-host of this particular panel. We are a relatively new think tank in the United Kingdom, set up in 2021 to partake in helping the UK to navigate a world that is more geopolitical, but also to make the world greener and a fairer and better place. So I am delighted today to have a number of panelists that will speak one after the other, and I'll just spend a few moments to introduce them. First up, we will have Ms. Anna Ravenko, who is the head of the Center for Strategic Communication and Countering Disinformation and the former Minister of Internal Affairs of the Republic of Moldova. Next, we have Ms. Alina Bergianu, who is the Senior Associate Expert of the New Strategy Center and the Dean of the Faculty of Communications and Public Relations of the SNSPA in Romania. We will then have Mr. Sasha Fairbach, who is an international technology and European affairs journalist in Austria. Then we have Ambassador Shota Gvinera, who is a faculty member of the Baltic Defense College in Estonia. And finally, we will have Mr. Tal Pavel, who is founder and director of CyBureau, the Institute for Cyber Policy Studies in Israel. So the topic today is Russia's cognitive warfare against the democratic world, how to achieve a better deterrence. And there are a number of questions that I'd like the panelists to engage in. The first is, what are the key strategies Russia is using in cognitive warfare against democratic nations? Next, in what ways has Russian cognitive warfare evolved in recent years, and how can democracies better understand and respond to this growing threat? Then, what role do strategic communications play in Russian efforts to influence public opinion and undermine democratic institutions, especially in the face of Russian meddling in the election process of countries like Romania and Moldova? And then finally, what steps can government, civil society and media organizations take to educate the public and increase awareness of Russian influence operations? Now, each speaker will have around 5 minutes to introduce their thoughts. I will then ask a few questions based on what they have said, and then we will open up for discussion with the audience. So please think about the questions that you might like to ask. And first up, we are over to Anna, who will say the first few words. Thank you.
Your Excellencies, good morning. I'm thrilled to see familiar faces, dedicated partners to the Republic of Moldova. And I'm equally encouraged to see such a great interest in understanding and developing strategic communication in addition to the arsenal of combating tools to hybrid threats. It's definitely, I take it as a collective sign of first understanding, hopefully the readiness to also collectively respond. Understanding that this is the very threat to democracy in Europe. It's a collective urgency, and the success only lays in a collective effort. So, to start with your questions, after the full-scale Russian invasion of Ukraine, the threats to democracy in Moldova have exponentially increased. The main external threat to the Republic of Moldova is the actions of the Russian federations to undermine the sovereignty, the independence of the Moldovan state, including through disinformation campaigns, through influence operations, with a high level of hostility towards the legitimate interest of our people. Now, to talk about the objectives of these destructive efforts. The analyses have clearly shown to the following major objectives of these campaigns. First, undermining the legitimacy of the pro-democratic political class of the Republic of Moldova and state authorities, including the reapproachment to the European Union, the process that was recently launched. Impeding the stability and economic development of the Republic of Moldova, which is imperative when we talk about the well-being and capacity of Moldova to stay solid, anchored in the ecosystem of political, social and economic systems of democratic world. Another objective clearly highlighted is the promotion of cultural and religious division, societal polarization, ethnic hate, attacking the pro-European foreign policy, including the efforts of the state authorities, of the democratic government to modernize and to strengthen the defense capabilities of the Republic of Moldova, targeting the very sovereignty of the Republic of Moldova by disseminating messages that are based on historical grievances, the nationalist sentiments, but also anti-Western rhetoric. Now, these influence objectives have clearly crystallized after the pro-Russian strategic communication to influence critical events that have happened in Moldova in the fall 24. And these are the constitutional referendum for the integration into the European Union, the both rounds of the presidential elections, but also the prices, the energy price crisis that was launched at the end of last year. Now, speaking about how do they do it? What are the vulnerabilities definitely exploited? And I can state from the very beginning that no state is crystal strong when it comes to various vulnerabilities, both societal and structural, that are agilely exploited by such hostile actors as Russia. So to achieve the strategic objectives, Russia is using a wide range of hybrid tactics, hybrid warfare tactics. It's the economic constraints, including the energy sector, instrumentalization of military presence in the Transnistrian region, direct and indirect support to the separatists in the Transnistrian region, but also to the leaders of Gagauz autonomy, exploitation of corruption networks, including linking businesses with politics, cross-border organized crime, targeted multiple cyber attacks, direct interferences in elections through bribery and intimidation. But also the hybrid warfare tactics include vast and solid influence operations and information manipulation campaigns. Now, since you mentioned the need also to address, or the interest, possible interest of the public to address a little bit on what are the key elements of the Russian information interference ecosystem, I'll mention just few that are highlighted clearly in Strategy Emerges, which combines electoral manipulation with influence operations of the public. To deep a little bit into it, through these tactics, electoral manipulation and the solid influence operations, Russia is not intended to influence this important democratic process. We have to look beyond it. But it's rather to redefine the collective perception before the elections. So when we talk about how to protect these democratic processes, is actually we have to go back and answer the question, what have we done before the elections as such? So what is Russia trying to influence is to reinforce a climate of uncertainty, of distrust, mistrust and social division. The stakes of this process are not only the electoral competition in itself, but the reshaping of political and social reality. So that Moldova's democratic oath and the partnership with the West is perceived as completely unsustainable, dangerous, while the reapproachment to Russia is seen as the only valid, viable alternative. In this context, the battle, and we are talking about information warfare, the battle is not just for the votes. We have to look much wider, but for the perception and beliefs of citizens in democracy, in democratic processes, in the capacity of the state to deliver security, in the ability to define their future freely, without any constraints. It's the inner agent, but also the collective capacity to influence their future. And yet, within this very reality, Moldova is becoming stronger. We are learning as we are doing. There is no other way. And we are just discussing with some colleagues this morning that it takes a crisis to progress. So the only way is to turn all these crises into lessons to learn, but also a wonderful opportunity to try and innovate. So how do we become more resilient adding up to the continuous efforts of the authorities to respond to hybrid threats through traditional combating tools. The Center on Strategic Communication that is operational now a little over 1 year and that I have the honor to lead brings significant contribution to this arsenal of tools to protect democracy, and primarily is focusing on promotion and protection of the strategic objectives of the national interests of the country against this information interference. So in this regard, the Center has dual mandate. On the one hand is to facilitate and strengthen the societal resilience towards this interference, but also provide strategic guidance, primarily to the leadership and to the state authorities, on how, through means of building their strategic communication capabilities and bringing unity in the effort to deliver the important state communication to the public. So let me be clear, the Center is an independent, autonomous state authority, which activates under parliamentary control. It's serving the national interests as they are prescribed in the Constitution and the National Security Strategy. So the mandate of the Center goes beyond a governing plan, let's say, on 4 years usually. And the law that governs the Center communicates in a completely transparent manner to the population about its mandate, obligations, functions, the rights and the capacities, and which also serves as a basis for implementing the whole of society approach, because we understand that the capacity of the government to communicate to the public on the national interest has exhausted itself within such a aggressive informational warfare. So Moldova has taken an approach where the involvement of all democratic forces, civil society, academia, private sector, media organizations, equally can bring up to the effort of promotion. But what we have also seen in this last period, that sustainable efforts takes unity not only on the domestic level, but definitely on the international level. And the immediate findings and conclusions that the Republic of Moldova indicate that in order to secure the challenges to democracy that are generated by the information interference, absolutely all actors, state and non-state, are called to strategize their efforts in order to increase resilience. And I'll just mention a few of the recommendations.
Because you've had 10 minutes, so we should probably move on. So could you summarize in 1 sentence, maybe?
3 recommendations.
Okay.
In order to also open eventually the debates. It's important that we first protect democratic values and reduce the polarization of the society. It's important to include not only the FIMI combating tools, but also Stratcom tools into national and collective security strategies. We need transparency in the media financing legislation in order to avoid cartelization. It is important to secure that the legislation protects media organizations, civil society, academia, and private sector from external interferences and allows them to stay as truly independent democratic voices in order to protect the authenticity of the public debate. We need to ensure that we not only develop our efforts to continuously detect influence operation campaigns, but also share among us the valuable findings. Especially it is important when it comes to timely response. Develop definitely institutional capacities for all the public servants, for all the professionals, in clear understanding what are those vulnerabilities that favor foreign influence operations, and how through both communication or policy measures we could reduce the effect of these vulnerabilities. But first and foremost, it's important for the countries to understand that none of us are protected. At the same time, none of us have this ideal, magic tool to stay protected, and the conditions that are in Moldova can be found anywhere with all the countries, both the strengths, the strong points, but also the vulnerabilities. But it takes first us to recognize collectively that it is about our democracy, it is about our unity and cohesiveness in the society that is important that we protect. And we can only act if we stay together. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, thank you very much. Now we move on to Alina.
Thank you very much. Well, to be a Romanian and to talk about a Romanian expert in cognitive warfare and to talk about cognitive warfare is a little bit uncomfortable or paradoxical, to put it very mildly. I will make some broad references to the issue of cognitive warfare and 2 references to the Romanian case. And of course, I will be open to Q&A. The first point, which is more general, is that cognitive warfare is, guess what is warfare? I think that the biggest mistake that we have done for at least 9 years or 10 years is to not to define it as warfare and to define it as a lesser, softer form of warfare. I think that cognitive warfare is part of the geopolitical influence war happening at the same time with other wars, such as the trade war, the capital war, or the technological war. But again, we are talking about warfare, and it is not about a lesser or a softer form of warfare, but this warfare creates casualties. People die out of its influence. The success in influence changes geopolitical, shapes the geopolitical order. So this will be my first point. The second point about ill-defined phenomena. I think that, again, what the Western world did wrong was to misunderstand cognitive warfare as something old with some new tools attached to it. I think that contemporary cognitive warfare takes place in a completely changed security and information environment, an environment in which the information ecosystem plays an oversized role, which, in my understanding, is completely different from any period in history. I think that there is strong conceptual resistance across all domains to realize that we are talking about a completely new phenomena for which the old conceptual tools do not help too much. The third point, which is general, and then I will feed a little bit into the conversation about the Romanian case. I think it is childish, to put it mildly, to consider that cognitive warfare just go away by magic. That was the expectation in Romania, that somehow cognitive warfare, you can call it narrative warfare, information warfare, disinformation and whatnot. The expectation for a long period of time, at least in Romania, is that this will somehow go away. This will disappear by magic. Of course, it does not. And feeding into the very recent Romanian experience, cognitive warfare continues. There is a big narrative warfare with the idea that the elections have been rigged, that Western actors interfered into our election, so the mirror tactic to turn the concept of interference to attach it to the fact that Western actors allegedly interfered into our elections, that there was a Maidan about to happen, that a bloodshed was avoided, and this continues as we speak at very, very high levels. It's not something marginal. It's not something that is happening on the fringe of the Romanian ecosystem, but it is part of the main public conversations. The fourth point, again feeding into the conversation about the Romanian case. Of course, the Romanian case is a gold mine. Really, as a Romanian citizen and as a Romanian expert, I wish we hadn't had such a gold mine, but I think it is really a gold mine for the cognitive warfare community. In my very harsh assessment, what happened in Romania in December, what happened until December, what happened between December and today, should have been an earthquake for Romania in the first place, and for any democracy. It was not. Of course, the case attracted a lot of attention, a lot of media headlines, but I think it was not an earthquake, and I don't think that was enough curiosity from the Romanian part, and again from the part of any democracy, to really look into what happened, how we got here, How to differentiate between long-term influence campaign and interference. How to differentiate between interference and collusion, and not to jump to collusion directly in order to pollute the conversation and simply do not understand anything. So again, at least some curiosity, how the case is exceptional, because of course it has some exceptional features attached to it, but how it is representative for larger trends in the whole transatlantic world. We need to differentiate the result, which of course is something to celebrate about really, and between the process that got us here. I think that focusing right now only on the result, which again needs to be celebrated, and obscuring the process that brought us here would be a huge mistake. And it would be an error not to exploit that golden mine of the Romanian case. And the final point, I think, I'm sure that it will sound very abstract, but I think that what has brought us here and what has the likelihood that the situation can repeat not only in Romania but in some other parts of the world is complacency. So I think that we have to develop all the tools that you rightly mentioned, but I think that we have to develop immunity and resilience against complacency.
Thank you very much. Over to Sasha.
Thank you so much. Also in the intro, I'm a journalist. I have a bit of a mixed bag of nationalities, so I'm going to offer my, let's say, observations here as an American, also as a European, but someone who definitely can offer an observational role as a journalist. And just listening also, and thank you again also to all the hosts for this fantastic event and having me here. Listening to the strategy element and listening to all those things, and I've had the advantage of seeing how that plays out. And I think it's really important to have that kind of strategy in place. Yes, and I think when I was listening to both of you and also generally, we use this terminology that is war-like, right? We have the arsenals, we have the weaponry, it's a war. And we're talking about influence and we're talking about impact. And at the end of the day, it's also very much how the public, how the ordinary public perceives this. I mean, strategy is one thing, but then what is the ultimate goal here? So, and if you have a lot of this language that is warlike, you eventually make people choose sides, even if you don't want to. At the same time, also, you're right, what Alina said, this is not over, right? Romania is one case, and you have to continue that messaging. And I've just observed, as being around in Brussels, being in the Baltic states, in Poland, very much from that media standpoint of view, it's become louder, but it's become more aggressive. And I think there's strategy on one hand, but at the end, is that fit at the end of the day? Is it reaching people? And if we're looking at some of the challenges, we look at the Romania case, you called a gold mine, we're looking also what's happening in Poland right now, that how we communicate is totally changing. These major platforms are also now that major way. Now, whatever actor is using those, that's one of the vehicles for this messaging. And just an interesting example is we now have the Digital Services Act, right? This tool that is supposed to help and protect us. Now that took more than 1 year. It took, I think, a decade to finally put together, right? It takes time. At the same time, enforcement. Now we finally have a prejudgment on the DSA with TikTok. Now there's a fine, but again, the impact will take time. And also on the other side, if we're looking at Russian influence and Russian campaigning, we always talk about the massive resources that the Kremlin has, and they do, and they continue night and day. But I also want to take my hat off to those in my journey who are, we talk about troll farms, we talk about all these bad actors, but what about the elves? If you ask the public, have you heard of a troll farm? Yes. Do you know what the elves are? They don't know what that is. The elves are those people who are putting right the rumors, who are also working day and night to rectify the problems, to make sure that we're also exposing and debunking all those myths. And I think they deserve as much attention as well. But it is also, as Alina said, Russia has been doing this for decades, right? It's not a switch on that they've just suddenly done. And we, I think, very much in the West have become, in a way, complacent, right? And now, only now, are finally re-engaging. Now, I'm not going to offer the solution here today, but I think that it revolves on strategy on the one hand, governments that are transparent, that know the effectiveness of this, but also media. Now, that is the challenge as well. In our siloed world of where people trust someone on YouTube, their favorite influencer, more than they do what's called the legacy media. I want to say when J.D. Vance came to Munich and also criticized Europe of not having free speech, I mean, I think that was a hypocritical statement, if we can see. But at the same time, there was some truth to it. I mean, in some cases, if you look at Germany, you know, some of the free speech laws there, you cannot insult politicians. That's a law in Germany. So that also gets in this whole mix. What is the solution? I think generally how we talk and convey information to the public, I think that's key. I think in some cases we have strategy, we have, you know, the cyber warfare, there's so many elements to this. Also in my time in cybersecurity, this stuff never stops, and most of the public will never know and never appreciate it, quite truly. But at the same time, what they do see and what they do digest is constant information, small, short package information, constantly on TikTok. And my observation as well is that the big tech companies, Meta, Facebook, etc., are not really held to account as much as they should, or the kind of resources that we're pushing on them is not in line with what we need. Another example from some time ago in the United States, I think in one foul swoop, the former government was able to shut down one of these major troll farms. The Treasury Department put on sanctions of one of these co-founders of RT. That was done like that. That can be done in Europe as well, but we're not doing it as fast. So I think there's that enforcement element as well. But I think it's about language, it's about inclusion, and we have radical elements, we have forces that we should debunk, absolutely. But as someone who's covered now media for some time, I think inclusion of more voices, even be they far from acceptable in some way, by their mere inclusion, we negate that impact. The more we push against this too aggressively, the more we silo them, and we lose the public that inevitably follows them. So I think in conclusion, all that, we need strategy, we need awareness absolutely on a political level, on a media level as well. You need more access. You need the politicians and the policymakers to speak out louder, more frequently. You need more fora like this, but also to include the young, the youth. I think that's really critically important as well. How much of this is going to be digested by them? Because that's going to be really important. Going around and speaking to different people on the street, if we do different reports, a lot of the things that we consider as something that is known in the public sphere that should be known about cognitive warfare, that is not known for the general public. So it's more about education, it's more about transparency, it's strategies, all these things combined. And as you said, resilience, continuation of never stopping. So I'm just going to wrap that up shortly because I know we're conscious of time, but just some food for thought in this way as we find some sort of solution.
Thank you so much. Okay, over to Shota.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much to the organizers, and thank you to my fellow panelists for actually setting out a very solid theoretical construct that I don't have to actually repeat all the very, very helpful ideas to understand what kind of a problem we're in. And what I will try to do in my 7 minutes is to bring some examples of how does that work in the real life. But first, I need to make one point regarding the theoretical background too. And I was taught not to fight with the organizers and the titles that are given for the panels, but I really have to talk about the concept of deterrence and applicability of the concept of deterrence to the information ecosystem and the cyberspace. And my point here is that deterrence is something that is a very useful concept for conventional warfare, but it's a very precise mathematical calculation of the costs and the benefits. And it can only work when you have constant variables. Like, you know, I'm going to attack somebody and I will occupy that territory. It will cost me 10,000 soldiers and this many ammunition, but it's worth it because I will achieve this and that objectives. If it's not possible to do that, and it's not possible to do that in information environment, it's not possible to quantify what is going to be the cost of engagement for the hostile actors to attack us in the cyberspace, to attack us through disinformation. There is absolutely no way we can incur the costs which will be greater than the benefit that they will receive from that operations. That's why I would suggest strongly to leave this concept of deterrence to the conventional domain and focus about our own ability to fight a cognitive warfare in information domain, in cyberspace domain, because the assumption here should be that we will never deter the hostile actors from launching information and cyber attacks on us. That's the first point I wanted to make very clearly. Then the second thing, from Soviet type active measures to the modern hybrid warfare, it has always been about the same thing. Nothing has changed there in terms of the strategies, in terms of the tools of engagement, in terms of the objectives. So if you read, for example, Primakov's doctrine and read then the ultimatums that Putin has sent on in December 2021, actually communicating to us what are his objectives in Ukraine, you will see that these things are very, very consistently following the same very coherent trajectory. What has changed is that this enormous rise of information ecosystem of cyberspace has enabled information to become a strategic weapon. And you can actually achieve much more today with much less costs and in shorter period of time through information operations than in the pre-internet time. That's it. That's the only difference. They're much more effective. You can reach millions of people in one click now, whereas through active measures you had to cultivate, physical informants and the spy networks on the ground to recruit people to actually spread your narrative. Now it's all happening in cyberspace, and it's click away, and it's cheap, and it's actually, and this has brought us to the situation where we have this big problem, which is distinguishing truth from the false. And this is something that is deliberately done by the hostile actors. They're trying to blur the boundaries between the truth and the false. And it has become, in a way, about the perspective. It's not about the real facts, because even the facts now can be presented from so many different perspectives that it depends on who your source is and how they give you the perspective on that fact. And it can be absolutely different. If you are, let's say, the US example, if you are a Republican and if you are watching the Fox News, you are looking at the fact that they cover, and then if you are the Democrat and watching the CNN and they're covering the same fact from their own perspective, it's absolutely different. I mean, you can not even figure out that they're talking about the same thing, but they're not necessarily lying. None of them are lying. They just have their perspective. They put forward the aspects of the topic that are interesting from their perspective, that are useful for their broadcasting policy, and the others do the same. But this is getting so weird, so crazy, that you're looking at the thing and you don't know what's going on. And this is exactly what Yuri Bezmenov describes as the demoralization, which is the first phase of active measures. When people lose the ability to absorb the facts because they're disoriented, they don't know what to believe, they think that everybody is lying to them, and when they do not know what to believe, they just lose the ability to act. And that's something that I think we don't have to underestimate, that even on the things that we're absolutely convinced 100% that it's true from our perspective. There are millions, hundreds of millions of people that are convinced in otherwise, and we do not have any possibility in reconvincing them in their already preset beliefs. So we have to actually have a consistent narrative, just like Putin. You know, there is an example, just one example I can give you. We have won the Second World War. We defeated Nazism. That's why if anybody is against Russia, they're Nazis. This is kind of a big strategic, crazy framework that is being used to develop sub-narratives, sub-messages, and they consistently do it, and there are hundreds of millions of people outside our reach who do not care about our information sources, our perspectives, that simply believe that. And that actually matters a lot. Now, about this lessons. I think there are three types of lessons that we have to be looking at. First type of lessons are the best examples, like Finland, Sweden, total defense, all of a society approach. They have been doing it for the decades. They know how to do it, and that's very good. You know, we have to learn from that. The other type of lessons are the wartime lessons, such as Ukraine and Israel, but it's different. You know, when you are at the wartime, you have actually different context, different variables, and it's not really applicable like in a copy-paste manner in many other places. But the third type of lessons that we actually need to be looking at much more are the lessons of failure, and where we have actually have not managed to engage in the information battlefield with the Russian disinformation and propaganda in a proper way. And I have just released a article, Targeted Disruptions. And this is about the elections in Georgia, Moldova, and Romania, all in a row in November, December 2024. And Russia has actually engaged in influence operation, interference campaigns in all three countries, using absolutely the same pattern, the same tools, just contextualized to the context of all three countries. And they have actually looked at the battlefield from two perspectives. One, institutional framework and how you can attack institutions to make them less able to counter your operations, and then the societal, how you make societies more vulnerable to the information attacks that you're doing. And basically what I was able to find out as a pattern is that they weaponize already existing vulnerabilities and grievances. They don't invent anything. They don't create these problems. They just weaponize mostly three things. Fears, and they know what people are afraid of and they use it very skillfully. The genuine grievances, such as poverty, such as the economic, social problems that people have, and ultras. So the crazy ideas or, let's say, illiterate ideas that can obstruct the mainstream political discussion and can deviate the debate to the secondary things, and then can be used as the obstruction of the system and the main political process. So these are the things that can only be dealt with in a coherent planning process. So back to where I started, I will finish with this. Let's think about how we plan out and incorporate information in our defense and security planning cycles properly, with proper resourcing, proper financing, rather than trying to deter something that is not deterrable. Let's fight this battle in information domain, just as we fight in the others, because this is the battlefield that defines all the other battlefields, and if you lose that, it's going to be very difficult to engage in other domains, having lost this battle first. Sorry, I was too long, and I pass on.
Thank you. Over to Tal.
Good afternoon. As a lecturer to my students, I prepare a presentation. Well, I think it's perhaps easier. Well, I call my presentation, it will be a very short one. Yesterday evening I cut 1/3 of it. Democracy, at risk, Russian cyber operations against European political systems. And I try to explain here a bit of cyber activities, okay, what is known as APT, if you heard the term APT, Advanced Persistent Threat. So let's start. I'll speak here a bit, about what is known as the 5 Ws. The who, the why, the where, when, and what. What are they doing? Let's see a bit. Okay, so what is APT? And it will be short, What is APT, which is known as Advanced Persistent Threat? Advanced Persistent Threat are cyber activities, cyber threats that performed by, in most cases, nation-state actors without being detected or noticed. And this is the definition of Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency at the US. Definitely it's advanced, it's persistent, and no doubt it is a threat. As defined by CrowdStrike, most of these attacks are performed by nation-states seeking to undermine another government. So even though some definitions regard APT as an advanced persistent threat that is performed by corporates or cybercriminals, in most cases, it is performed by nation-state. And I often say that it's not backed by nation-state, but it's based hackers. The same as we have James Bond with license to kill, they have license to hack. Okay, they are nation-state officials. In this definition in bullets, we see why it's a huge problem. I mean, we see that they are significantly more complex. I mean, those attacks and those threat actors, they're not hit-and-run attacks. Once a network is infiltrated, the perpetrator remains in order to attain as much information as possible. It's not a hit-and-run. They are low and slow attack under the radar. They're manually executed. It's not on the shelf tools, but they are producing their own attacking tool and finding the vulnerabilities against a specific mark and indiscriminately launch against a large pool of targets. I mean, they have a lot of resources to perform any type of attack against a lot of sectors and corporations and governmental institutions around the world. They often aim to infiltrate an entire network as opposed to one specific part. Regarding Russian APT, by the way, all those images I've created using AI, it's an AI-generated image. All of them I created using Midjourney, this one as well. All the cyber attacks, when you ask Midjourney and AI platform to create something which relate to cyber, it's always with explosions and fire and flames. And so when it's come to Russian APT, we have dozens, well, this is the claim at least, dozens of Russian cyber groups, as you can see the number and the source below. And here you can see, well, who stands behind it. And those are at least the claims of, you can see Russian state authorities, security authorities that stands behind part of those well, most famous cyber threats group, APT28, which is also known as Offensive, APT29, which is cozy, but just as you saw, 2-3 from dozens. And in some cases, there is also an ability to uncover some of those, which means it's not only theoretical, but in some cases, yeah, the law enforcement are able to uncover, well, at least find who stands behind it, the entities. Why? Why do they perform those cyber attacks? Well, in most cases, there are two main reasons. The first is espionage, I mean intelligence gathering, and the second is sabotage and distractions. North Korea, by the way, is the only one, as far as I know, that perform also a third type, which is stealing money, billions of US dollars, okay, to support its economy. But at the end of the day, most of those APT groups, they're performing one or two and/or espionage and sabotage. Why? For strategic or political purposes, meaning they will not, in most cases, they will not steal our credit cards, they will not target individuals, okay? In most cases, it will be either stealing intellectual properties or sabotage or leaking information that may serve strategic goal. I mean, strategic or political. They may serve a nation state, the army, the establishment. This is an example, one example. We can see here underwater internet cables and a Russian submarine. And I brought those headlines, yeah, a decade ago. And you can see the fear, the Western fear of the existence of such submarines close to those underwater internet cables from two perspectives. The information technology, meaning the ability to gather intelligence, to intercept messages, and from the operational technology, the OT, I mean, the ability to harm those cables and the consequences of harming those internet cables. And we should do kind of zoom out and thinking cyber attacks. What are the implications of harming those underwater internet cables? Well, you can see here the diversity of APT, Advanced Persistent Threat Groups around the world. 40% are allegedly Chinese, but something like 26% are supposed to be Russian, probably nation state hackers. Here it's the diversity of targets of one of those, APT28, fancy bear, around the world. You can see the victims, well, at least when it's come to states, this is one, APT28, and APT29, which is also known by the name Cozy Bear. Definitely a lot of targets around the world, and here again, it's only, there are only two groups out of dozens. When? This is very interesting because I thought to put, screenshot of headlines, but I made it stable to kind of gather some of allegedly Russian state cyber attacks against European states. In the last year and a half, beginning of January 2024, what I marked in bold are those cyber attacks that relate to elections. And you can see that at least half of them directly relates their cyber attack, alleged Russian cyber attack against European state that allegedly relates directly to political aspects or mainly elections. This is from yesterday. This I found yesterday evening. Russian military hackers codename Fancy Bear, that's the APT-28 that I've just mentioned, behind sustained cyber attacks targeting UK firms. And the sub-headline was that Russian military cyber unit codename Fancy Bear, APT-28, was carried out a string of cyber attacks on UK defense transport hubs and shipping over the last 2 years. That's, once again, only from yesterday. What are they doing? As you can see here, there are 3 types, and already mentioned the different aspect of cyber attacks before, during the election campaign, and against the election system, and all kinds of cyber attacks, including defacement, distributed denial of service attack, meaning DDoS attack, IO, meaning information operation, disinformation, and so on and so forth, fake news. And those are the types that relates to Russia. Those are the types that relates to Russia. You can see the threat actors and the type: intrusion, hybrid, and information operation. And yeah, well, that's the last slide. I found it, and it was very interesting, this quote, and headline: Russia interference coming soon to an election near you. Russia pursued a systematic strategy of undermining election. And I'll say kinetic and cyber undermining, and influencing public opinion in the West. EU and NATO countries must recognize that Moscow often acts through agents, once again, physical, virtual, and we didn't mention at all AI, which is crucial, with their own borders, and build resilience to such, I'll mention, cyber and IO, information operation interference. Well, that's it. That's my part. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So we've had 5 very interesting presentations on cognitive warfare, and I think some disagreement maybe among the panelists in terms of what this means. So it seems to me that one of the ideas that came out here was that cognitive warfare is not soft. It's not a soft form of warfare. It's not just about a few tweets. It's about control over the very foundations of our power, i.e. that which binds us together at the national level, and also that which binds us together at the international level, which keeps the world free and open. It's no surprise that our rivals, whether Russia or China or others, are so keen on going after the Atlantic Alliance or other alliances and partnerships which bind together the free and open world. The question I have, though, is that if deterrence is not possible, and I think one panelist mentioned that, then what do we do? Now, a few years ago, I was at a presentation or a conference at the Stratcom Centre in Riga. And I remember asking then, how do we go on the offensive? And I was told, and this was some years ago, that we shouldn't go on the offensive because we're better than that. Now, I have to say, I think this is a bit of a cop-out, and I think that subsequent events have shown us that we do actually need to be more proactive. So I suppose one of my questions is going to be my first question, and I'm only going to ask one so that we have enough time to open up to the audience, and maybe there would be 2 volunteers on our panel that would answer this question. How do we, i.e. how do the democracies, how do we go on the offensive? How do we take cognitive warfare to Russia, to China, and to others? Would anyone like to have a go?
I think that's the core point. I mean, being in denial, there are 5 stages, right? Everybody knows, I will not repeat them. But if you're still in denial, and if you do not recognize that you are in warfare, warfare is not a marriage. It does not require consent from both sides. You know, if one side decides to go to war, it's a war. And if you keep repeating that, no, 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 I'm not at war, and it's not my war, and it will not change things. It will still hurt you. And that's what we're looking at also partly in the information domain, because we keep saying, no, 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 it's not a warfare, and we have to only defend ourselves, and we're going to the tank battle without having barrels and only armor in our tanks. Is it possible to win that kind of battle? Of course not. So it's basically about understanding that this is a first phase of any warfare that will occur in the 21st century that defines all the other domains. If you lose your information warfare in the beginning of a conflict, it means that you have actually yielded the initiative and you basically gave up the superiority in all the other domains that are involved in that warfare, because that's the defining domain. And that's something we just really have to understand conceptually first, and then develop the tools to engage in that modern warfare in a way that we basically are able to defend ourselves.
Yep, Sasha?
Yeah, just briefly, I think also back to the whole idea of influence in media, we said denial. And also I think influence of media elsewhere. I mean, if we look at, I forget the exact statistic, but I think Russia today produces more fake news and horrible posts in the Middle East and Africa, I think, in different languages than Deutsche Welle, France 24, and I think the BBC combined, right? So RT, again, building, I think, an academy in South Africa, opening something new, I think, in India. So I think also what's key here is cooperation and partnership. So more, let's say, open media that's supported by institutions, perhaps the European Union, that's more present in Africa, in the global south. I mean, those voices also matter. And we're talking about also going on the offensive. I'm not going to stand here and say, yeah, let's go. But I think it's also about soft power, about influence, about telling that message, not just to our citizens here in Europe, and to our allies, but I think also in those areas which are really key, right? Who is, quote unquote, winning that war in Africa? Who's winning that in South Asia, right? And you said it's not our war, and probably if you go to some of those countries, they're open for business. Those people, it's not their war. Why? Is that messaging? Perhaps so. So I think more also communications, more, I think, presence by, let's say, more of an aware and cooperative, engaged media supported through Western governments that is present in some of those key places that I mentioned.
Thank you. Now, I am conscious...
10 seconds. Pretending to go on the offensive without protecting our public spaces in the first place is presumptions, to say the least.
I think that the question we have to all ask ourselves, will the offensive approach keep us united? Will keep a cohesive society? Because that's exactly the target of the Russian information warfare. And from what Moldova has learned until now is that this is far not enough. Being proactive and focusing on the effect, that's most important. Bringing into the information space information about national interests, about collective values, our common values, being the first in the information space, being, as some of my colleagues, fellow colleagues in the strategic communication community say, let's invade the information space with factual data, as much as possible information that would reach to all the groups and sparkle the bubbles. Be the first. So it's offensive around what? Increasing awareness only about the threats, or staying united around what brings us in a single democratic space. That increases the resilience of the society. So when these operations are coming, there is some sort of immunity, as my colleagues were saying. That is how we approach, at least in Moldova. So it's coming to the very first question: will this bring unity and keep us continuously united again around our common values?
Okay, thank you. So we have a couple of minutes, so maybe one question from the audience. Who would like to have a go? Yes, please.
It appears that the consequence is very low to. It appears that the consequence is very low to a country like Russia or any of these countries. For instance, in the Romanian election, even if they lost, their candidate didn't succeed. They got 45, and you would get some votes anyway, but 45%. So one of my questions is basically what can be the consequence? Because like in the kinetic war, they know the consequence. What's the consequence to them for trying this? What would actually work as a form of deterrence?
That's why has basically said that it's not possible to deter because there are no ways to raise costs for information operations. That you cannot send people to jail for lying. You know, you cannot basically. Well, it's very difficult and controversial, and it's not gonna. It will. I do not know of any best established example that has led to the results in this regard, so maybe we can talk later. You can teach me how to do that, because I have never learned any practical examples of how to raise the cost of this information so that you discourage the threat actor to design and implement information operations and disinformation. I'm just not aware of that.
If I may add, please. In order to have deterrence, you need to know who performed this operation. Information operation, cyber operation. The core, the essential problem of the cyberspace is what is known as the attribution problem. So if you cannot attribute a cyber threat, a cyber operation, a cyber attack, information operation to the threat actor that operated, that's the main problem. And not necessarily we have a smoking gun, mainly when it's related to cyber, hardcore cyber attacks. Regarding how to confront, I think that before offensive operation, the best thing that we can do is the education. In information security, one of the core issues is the John McCumber Cube from 1961. And 3 countermeasures: technology, policy, and procedures, and the third one is education. I regard the education as the most important thing. I mean, especially, and we did mention that, the AI, how we consume content in the age of AI, because nowadays it's so easy to fake and to create an alternative truth. So even before the ability to create offensive, how we confront, how we consume content, how we consume media, okay? That's the main problem that I see nowadays. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm conscious that we're keeping you from your lunch, so I'm afraid our time is up. I think 3 of the key things that have come out of this discussion is, well, one, maybe deterrence is not possible. Secondly, we need to educate the public and to make them aware of the risks that are involved. Thirdly, that we need to catch up with technology. Some of our technology, particularly in the social media domain, has allowed hostile actors to get in among us and spread their narratives. And then, and maybe only then, we can go on the offensive. Thank you, panelists, and thank you, guests, for joining us. Please go and enjoy your lunch. Thank you.